Hello, and on this week's episode of Sword for Hire Sunday, we'll be taking a look at inspiration, magical word there, and how kind of Sword for Hire came to be with the inspirations for the book, which is under some stuff, so we'll just get to that in a second. So inspiration and influences can come from all kinds of places. Of course, my influences started whenever I was a kid. I was watching probably a couple movies that I probably shouldn't have been watching, like The 13th Warrior. This movie was, of course, adapted from a novel by Michael Crichton called Eaters of the Dead. When I was a kid, I didn't know that. I just knew it was Antonio Banderas and 12 Vikings fighting some cavemen, and it was awesome. In addition to The 13th Warrior, I also watched Legend on repeat. If you're not familiar with this movie, it is the movie where Tim Curry plays the devil, and he has really big horns. And both of these movies affected me in two different ways. One, 13th Warrior is about a group of people coming together to fight an evil force. It kind of they call the trope like doing in the wizard. This is a movie that there is no real supernatural aspects of it. It actually takes the myth of Beowulf and then turns it kind of on its head and says, well, it wasn't a dragon, it was a group of them with a group of the evil guys with torches making a fireworm. But it's, while not medieval fantasy, it is medieval, and it is something that kind of stuck with me for a long time. And Legend, on the off chance, is the exact opposite. It is a world purely ran on fairy tale logic. And so both of these movies have stayed with me from when I first saw them at 6 or 7 to all the way as an adult at 34. So a lot of my influences growing up was, of course, movies, but obviously anime is a huge influence on me. If you're someone who's gotten to read the first 4-page story of Sword for Hire, you know that manga influenced that story heavily. But talking about anime, one of the huge influences is Cowboy Bebop. If you're not familiar with Cowboy Bebop, it is about a group of bounty hunters. Each episode is focused on them tackling a different bounty until around the end when the kind of myth arc happens and everything wraps up. The story follows Spike and Jet, who, just like Gene and Craig, they're always on the hunt for their next meal or their next job, and they're kind of ride or die together, best friends without saying they're best friends, and they get along together, but they also, they're going to challenge each other. That's one thing I don't get into, at least in this first issue of Sword for Hire. But one thing that I want to is that that Gene and Craig have very different goals in life, and they are best friends, they're teammates, but sooner or later that's going to come up in conversation. Talking about the non-anime, non-film examples of influences on Sword for Hire, of course that brings us to actual novels and actual books, as well as comic books. So the first one I want to bring up with, and this is honest to God, not on purpose, but the first one is Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, of course, originally heroes created by Fritz Lieber for short stories and novels. I first found them... Let me back up. So the first Sword for Hire script I did all the way back in 2012 or 2013, back when it had its original title of Mage Slayer, because I was just turned I was in my early 20s, and I thought that was a good title for a book. And it was pretty much a lot of the same beats of Sword for Hire. Gene was kind of the same character, but Craig had not been created yet. I knew that Gene needed a friend, but I hadn't settled on Craig yet. Craig actually came together from Dungeons & Dragons. I was playing with some friends. I created a character called Craig T. Rogue, and I love the name so much, and I love the goofiness of my character in Dungeons & Dragons so much that I said, this would be the perfect character for this comic that I want to write, apparently a decade from now. But when I created them, they very much were bits and pieces from different characters. I absolutely adore Berserk, so there was definitely a bunch of guts in Gene. There's definitely a bunch of Spike from Cowboy Bebop in Gene. There's a bunch of myself in Gene and Craig, as well as my friends. My friend Seth, who my wife thinks that Craig is based off on, and there's parts of him there, but I think at the end of the day these are their own characters, but they do owe a lot to especially Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, because one thing I did not think of So 2012, 2013, I wrote the first script for what was Mage Slayer at the time. And then about 3 years later, about 2015, 2016, is when I started working at a comic book store, and I ran across Fafnir and Grey Mouser by Howard Chaykin and Mike Mignola, which was the adaptation of a couple of the stories by Fritz Lieber. And I had already planned on making Jean a failed sorcerer's apprentice. I love the idea of this character that is really good at one thing, but his life's passion or something that he loves, he's bad at. I thought that was a really interesting thing to put in for Jean specifically. And of course, I started reading Fafnir and Grey Mouser, and I found it out in book form here and there. And of course, the Grey Mouser is a wizard's apprentice, or former wizard's apprentice. So definitely some similarities there. Not on purpose, but one of the stories I want to tell I call On the Shoulders of Giants, and I think that's a big part of the fantasy genre in general. Guys like Fritz Lieber, guys like Robert E. Howard definitely blaze the trail for schlubs like me to try to write something, even if it's not in the same short story, novella, or novel concept, but in comic books. And of course, there I gotta give my blessings, give the flowers to, of course, guys like Jack Kirby, who gotcha, or not Bernie Wrightson, Barry Windsor Smith, Kurt Busiek, Carrie Nord, all these guys who worked on like these Conan titles or these fantasy titles that absolutely just kind of changed my perception on media. So one of the other influences on Sword for Hire is Hellboy by Mike Mignola. Also, I think John Byrne wrote the first part of it because Mike wasn't sure that he wanted to be a writer as well as an artist. Of course, he killed both. But Hellboy, so the thing I got from Hellboy, as far as influences go, is when I started doing Sword for Hire, and I started realizing how much a comic book was going to take to create, not just time-wise, but money-wise. I said, well, I can't guarantee I can do issues 1 through whatever of this. But what I can do, she's back. But what I can do, and what Hellboy does very well, as well as Cowboy Bebop, but I kind of use both of these in this example, is that one thing I can do is do some one-shots or do stories that aren't connected. I don't need to do a 4-issue mini to tell the story of Jean and Craig. Maybe they just need to fight a cave troll for 1 issue, and then the next issue is maybe set before this book or set after, and they're fighting a necromancer. Spoilers for possibly a book coming later. But I love the idea that these characters, these stories can be told not in chronological order. Don't need they don't need a ton of time. They don't need this investment of 5 or 6 issues or longer. But if I can tell one story, if I can tell one good story, if I can tell one good story, then that will be enough. And then I will, this baby, if I can tell one good story, then that'll be enough to kind of carry on and then start slowly developing more one-shots if I can. Of course, it all comes down to what happens with crowdfunding or publishing once I actually get to that point. And of course, that is just a brief conversation on some of the influences for Sword for Hire. Project's still going on right now. I have 6 pages. By the time this releases, I'll have talked to Jacopo again about probably doing some more pages. But we're moving along. As of right now, all the art should be done by October if we keep on the schedule that we talked about originally. However, and I fully realize that I am the one to blame for the project taking so long. Where we did this, I said, hey, I'd like to do X amount over X time. Jacopo turned out to be a lot faster than I thought he was going to be. So I think we're going to expedite that process a little bit. Maybe June, maybe July, the art will be done, but of course I have to pay for the lettering and other stuff. But yeah, Sword for Hire is still kicking. Really excited to get Witches Don't Burn off the ground. As I mentioned earlier, I am already considering ideas for the next one-shot. Possibly, I have 2 titles. I have 2 titles in mind, and I'll let you guys I'll let you guys pick which one sounds better. That we should. I have not written either of them. I'm in the idea. I'm in the idea phase of both of them. My Inner Kentucky's coming out. I tell you. But no, I'm in the idea phase of both of them. The first story is called The Wandering Corpse, which is about a wandering corpse and a necromancer. The second story is called On the Shoulders of Giants. I don't have as much of an idea of what's going on there. I need to sit down and start drafting some stuff. But I don't want to start writing that until this book is either at least halfway or fully done, because I don't want to get creator ADHD at all. Cats, I am filming. But that's all I got. I just want to talk about the influences for Sword for Hire briefly. And like, share, subscribe. Basically, we'll be back next time I'm on here. I am absolutely sure of it. But I am talking to other comic book creators about coming on and talking to me about their comics. With any luck, I'll have another one early March. And then I have a convention I have to go to, which I'll try to upload some content for the convention. And then we're back home for a little bit. But I gotta get back to my cats. They're being buttholes. So there's just a little bit of the influences on Sword for Hire. I appreciate you guys watching. Like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. And I will see you guys on the next round.